Hello and welcome back to this Damn Food Idealistic Crusade. This video will be going over a massive amount of really interesting video titles that I've picked up from the various local stores and some online sales that have popped up recently. This is, of course, dealing with DVD and Blu-ray for the most part, so it's, different from my usual Laserdisc videos, but again, some really interesting titles, stuff you just never see locally have popped up. Some more from that original collection has come through the local stores, so this video will feature some more Warner Archive MOD DVDs, in addition to some specialty label Blu-rays that are starting to turn up, particularly a number of Olive Films Blu-rays are turning up in discount sections and Dollar Trees and stuff. I wanted to start it off with this really particular item that I found. It was in part of the VHS clearance bin, and I don't normally look at tapes, but every once in a while I'm trying to find a film without a good audio soundtrack on Laserdisc, or I'm searching for a film that, like, for example, how Warner Brothers remixed Dirty Harry and Bullet, trying to find the original mono tracks for those. You pretty much have to go all the way back to the very first VHS releases in the pre-hi-fi era. But sometimes VHS is still a good source for a cleaner or better audio presentation, particularly with hi-fi encoding. But this is a particular release I didn't know existed on tape. It's a very important release because, of course, this version was thought lost for the longest time and was exclusive to the Laserdisc and widescreen for the longest time until the recent Koch Media German Blu-ray release. But I knew it was available on tape, but I didn't know there was a letterbox tape. So I picked this up for a mere quarter, and I know this is quite uncommon. So I just wanted to feature it because, again, it was such a strange find. So this is the MGM 2 VHS tape box set release of the Roadshow version of The Alamo. This, of course, is the pretty famous and well-known John Wayne directed feature about the final siege of the Alamo, but this is actually the fully uncut Roadshow version that was thought lost for many years until a lone 70mm print was discovered and transferred for video, released on Laserdisc in the lovely box set. And then eventually, in the late 90s, they spiffed it up with an AC3 release, which is an extremely rare Laserdisc and one of my prized LDs. And for years, ever since that is the way to see the Roadshow version. It's not been released on DVD. They always reissue the theatrical cut in an old master. But recently, Koch Media has put out a version of the Roadshow that seemingly either, I don't know if it's a Laserdisc capture or they probably used the original video master and they simply slot in the Roadshow sections that aren't in the theatrical cut into the theatrical cut master. And I'm hoping that makes it over here. Somebody picks that up and does something similar. Otherwise, I'll probably wind up importing it. But anyway, I had no idea the Roadshow came to VHS in a letterbox presentation. There are, of course, pan and scan versions, also double tape because, of course, the excessive length of the film. But again, I always thought they were the theatrical cut, and if the Roadshow did make it, I was sure it was pan and scan. But lo and behold, I stumbled across this. Uses the same art, so the only way you'll know is the fact that it has the deluxe widescreen edition banner on the bottom, and see if I can get this to focus. It actually advertises the original uncut edition. So this is the Roadshow version, and as you can tell, it's using the art from the Laserdisc jacket, but sized for VHS dimensions. So the side is rather generic, and rather funnily enough, they used what is seemingly a very faded still for the jacket art, which I thought was kind of interesting. Trying to hold the tape so they don't pop out, but again, it's rather generic and simple in terms of everything, but it is actually explaining letterboxing and such for the uninitiated on VHS. This is actually a much later VHS release than I realized. It's actually from 1998, so it has the modern UA logo at the time and the MGM Home Entertainment banner. So this is, obviously, it's not a Laserdisc late release, but it's getting pretty late for VHS, and it's such a strange variant that I couldn't let it sit there, especially when they were selling the entire set for a quarter. And here on the labels, MGM was always good about indicating the letterboxing there as well. So you can see it is the full roadshow version with the letterbox format credit on the actual label itself. And as MGM would always do, they always put the little gold stamp, which I always liked, on the edge of the tape itself. So I get it to focus there. There we go. The G's rubbed out a little bit. So yeah, this was a tape I had no idea existed, and since I've never seen one of these before, I'm pretty sure I will never see one of these again, and I picked it up simply to check and see, if it had somehow any differences compared to my Laserdisc copy. I have demoed it. It obviously does not. It is the same master, but on tape, and it's quite bizarre seeing that master at VHS resolution, and of course, it being letterboxed, you lose a giant chunk of resolution, but this does exist. So if you want to see the Roadshow version, you don't have a Laserdisc player, and you didn't import the Koch Media set, and you aren't region free in terms of Blu-ray capability, there is the Roadshow version letterboxed on VHS. It does exist. So again, just a bizarre, strange find. I just couldn't let sit there in the box of tapes for a quarter. So next we'll move on to the stack of DVDs. And first off is one of two double feature pairings that I found. This one is not necessarily rare, but it is trickier to find these days. This, of course, is the Warner Brothers release of Boys Town, the classic that is one of the films where Spencer Tracy won a Best Actor Oscar. But the reason why you want to track down this original pressing is it's actually a flipper DVD inside, because of course they actually include the follow-up feature Men of Boys Town. So it's actually a double feature set, even though obviously it's not crediting that outside of the little tiny mention here. But it's been reprinted a number of times and included in some of the TCM 4-film favorites set. But that means, of course, it's dropping the supplemental feature. So if you want Men of Boys Town, this is the only way to get it. As always, Warner Brothers does include some nice little bonuses. So you get a radio show excerpt, a vintage featurette from the time, a promotional featurette as well, and then the trailers for both films. If you haven't seen Boys Town, it is highly influential in terms of, there have been films like it made dozens and dozens of times since. It can definitely be a bit on the I'm trying to think of the right word. It's not schmaltzy, or cheery, but yeah, it's definitely trying to tug on the heartstrings a bit. But of course, all Spencer Tracy has to do is enter a scene, and your eyes are just glued to the screen. So it's a classic of its kind, and this way you get the supplemental feature, which I've actually never seen. I know I've seen the trailer for it, and I think I've seen maybe part of it on TCM once, but I've never gotten to see it all the way through. So yeah, that's the only way you can get the supplemental feature, is picking up the original DVD release here. Now this one is long out of print. You can get the individual features reprinted from the Warner Archive as MOD discs, but this original double feature set is out of print and goes for a nice little chunk of change on eBay, as of course the double feature release of the two versions of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So you have the original 30s version starring Frederick March, the Oscar winner Jekyll and Hyde, directed by Ruben Mamoulian, the pre-code Jekyll and Hyde that everybody likes to say is better than the 1940s version, directed by Victor Fleming, starring Spencer Tracy. But honestly, they each have their pluses and minuses. Jekyll and Hyde is one of those stories I personally don't think anybody has fully nailed yet, because the original Stevenson short story, well, it's really a novella. It's not a full novel. It's not a short story. It's really got a mystery aspect that has never quite been nailed. And starting with the 30s version, every time a screenwriter approaches it, they always want to... really, in the 30s version, it tries to add a certain, I guess, almost Freudian aspect to it, with Jekyll having a very Victorian life, and it's got issues. He has issues about his basically his repressed sexual urges and his thwarted romances and things, and that's fine, and it's a great film and a classic. But I still wish that we could have a version that literally has that mystery almost tinges of Sherlock Holmes or H.G. Wells that you get in the Stevenson story. And I really do like some things in the Victor Fleming version. And of course, Spencer Tracy does give a really interesting performance, but it's all it's done differently. And of course, MGM did try to suppress the earlier 30s version, so it was very difficult to see the 30s version for a long time. So, of course, this was a really cool presentation when they made this DVD, and of course, it's earlier on, so it is a snapper case. I will open up here. Of course, the disc is a flipper. Get the nice little bit of chapter stops here for each film. I'm excited to look at this again because I have the Mamoulian original film on LD, but I remember renting this a long time ago, but I've never actually owned this because it did go out of print, and it's been a very long time since I've seen the 40s version. I remember liking things in it, but I am interested now to do a double header comparison because I really enjoy doing stuff like that. And then the other cool thing is, not only do you get some vintage Looney Tunes shorts and you get a trailer for the 41 version, but something I wish I had listened to when I rented it originally, Greg Mank, the great horror historian, does a audio commentary for the 32 version, so I can't wait to dig into that. I adore all his commentary tracks that I've ever heard. So yeah, if you ever see this, definitely grab it because this will usually run you anywhere between $20 and $30 or more now on eBay, simply trying to find a copy of this. And there are a lot of bootlegs, so it is difficult to find the original double feature set. But if you just want the films and you don't care about having the original pressing, Warner Archive does offer them as a separate MOD disc. But of course, you will have to pay the usual going rate for a DVD on demand. Next up are 3 Errol Flynn titles to move 3 steps closer and having all of the titles that Warner Brothers has released of their Errol Flynn films. So this is 1946's Never Say Goodbye, again from the Warner Archive label. This is Errol doing essentially a romantic comedy. I've seen pieces of this before, but never the whole thing, so this will be a first-time watch all the way through, and I'm just always excited to chip away at Warner Archive discs of some of my favorite actors and actresses and directors and writers. Basically, there are certain names that I'm always looking to fill in gaps of either films I haven't seen or don't have a copy of. And with the Warner Brothers classic catalog titles, a lot of them are, of course, exclusive to the archive division. And, of course, the more obscure films like this, it's going to be a very long time if they ever hit Blu-ray. But most of the Errol Flynn titles, we do have the nice signature box sets and the TCM World War II box set. But this just moves me one step closer, and it's not an action picture. It's an actual romantic comedy. So you get to see Errol Flynn do something out of the typical wheelhouse that Warner Brothers was keeping him in. Next up from 1950, this is not in the archive division, but this is the original snapper case that I've been trying to find for quite a while. This is 1950's Kim, based on the classic Rudyard Kipling story, and really a great Technicolor location adventure film, really done in the mold of King Solomon's Mines from 1950, which really sort of spawned a whole new sort of subgenre for a bit of action adventure films with location footage shot in Technicolor, with a notable star known for doing some sort of action or swashbuckler films beforehand. And of course, Errol by this time was getting older, so he kind of got passed over for King Solomon's Mines and other films, which led to Stuart Granger becoming popular. But this one is really well done and interesting, and of course it's primarily from the actual boy's perspective. So it's actually a great film for children, and of course is based on Kipling, and you get the nice bonus of having real location footage and really nice Technicolor photography. The cover is beautiful using original art, and of course is a snapper case. Show you the rear. You get 2 vintage featurettes and then a little bit of text screen notes about Kipling, but this is actually made very well. Again, pretty much coming off the heels of films like King Solomon's Mines. And it's also interesting seeing Dean Stockwell play the titular Kim himself, because, of course, we know him for many films throughout the 80s and 90s and beyond. So you get to see him extraordinarily young, and he gives a really great performance. The performances are great all around in this film, but pretty much every time Errol appears, he basically steals the whole movie. And one wishes he had more of a leading part, but he's just kind of sprinkled in throughout the narrative. But I've been trying to find this for ages. Warner Archive has reprinted it, but of course without the snapper case as an MOD DVD. Next up, from 1952, going back to Errol being in a more action picture, is Maramaru, directed by Gordon Douglas. I haven't seen this in a very long time, so I'm happy to finally be able to give it another watch. I remember little bits and pieces, and this is, coming later in Errol's career, where he was already... You can see him start to... I'm trying to think of the words other than visibly deteriorate, because he famously had the adage applied to him: live fast and die young. But all of his films always have something interesting to dig into, so I'm excited to check this out. And of course, it's a Warner Archive disc, so it has the traditional layout and such. It's just amazing to ever find MOD DVDs just sitting on a store shelf in local shops. So again, really awesome that these have been turning up, and I couldn't resist chipping away at another Errol Flynn title that I needed. Next up, we have another Warner Archive title. This will go on my director's shelf, and this one's a bit of an interesting title because this is actually one of the last feature films that the legend himself, John Ford, worked on. But apparently he had to leave the film due to illness, and so this film, which is 1965's Young Cassidy, starring Rod Taylor, was finished and then credited to the legendary cinematographer Jack Cardiff. So Jack Cardiff directed the film, or most of the film. It's really unknown how much John Ford directed, at least as far as I understand it. I've never gotten to see this, and I was surprised to see this in there. I just saw the DVD on the shelf, and I'm like, why does that title ring a bell? And I pull it off the shelf, and of course I see it was directed by Jack Cardiff, and I'm like, oh, it's one of his features. And then, but thankfully, Warner Archive was nice enough to put in the descriptive notes the little bit about John Ford starting the film and then having to leave due to illness. It doesn't have the greatest reputation, but of course, anything that Ford ever touched in some way, shape, or form, I want to see and analyze. And I've seen some of the films that Jack Cardiff directed, that he's credited with directing, and he did do some interesting things. So it's always interesting to see somebody come up from a different field. Usually it's editors or second unit directors, but every once in a while the cinematographer gets his day in the sun. And so I'm excited to check this out because it is a partial Ford picture that I've never seen. Next up, from 1936, is a William Wyler picture from MGM's DVD department. This is Come and Get It, which stars Edward Arnold, Joel McCrea, and is another title that I've never seen and wanted to because it's actually a dual credit again. So this is credited to being directed by both Howard Hawks and William Wyler. And I'm not exactly sure. I don't think it says here on the back. It doesn't really tell you why they're both credited. I'm not for sure. I presume one had to leave and the other finished, or I don't know if maybe Goldwyn himself was not pleased with one of them at the time. I'm not exactly sure the backstory on why it's a dual credited feature, but I just thought it was interesting to find another rare title that you just are not going to see sitting around in a store, but it's another title where you have two legendary figures who are essentially sharing credit. And I know they don't really share credit on Young Cassidy, but it was obviously two directors, and you have the same here, and it's split between Hawks and Wyler, which is an interesting combination. So this will be an interesting picture to see. I don't know if it's going to feel like sort of a patchwork between their two very different styles, but the cast alone and the fact that they're attached to it, it seemed like a no-brainer, and I'm really excited to check this out because I think this is going to be a really interesting experience. Okay, another 1936 title. This is one I've been meaning to pick up for a while because it's one of the few William Powell and Myrna Loy films that I didn't have a copy of. As of course, MGM's big showstopper, The Great Zigfield. This is the really lovely cover original snapper case pressing from Warner Brothers. Of course, you can get this in a keep case version, but I'm now getting nostalgic for snapper cases. I might be losing my mind, but it's neat because you also get the interior art, which sort of gives the feel of a Laserdisc jacket a little bit. So you do get some extras. You get a documentary on the film, the traditional Warner Brothers DVD documentary style, and then you get the premiere newsreel, and that's it for your extras package. And then there's the interior. Now, of course, this was MGM's giant Oscar-winning showstopper musical sensation of the century. So it has an exceptional runtime of 3 hours and 5 minutes. So it's not everybody's cup of tea, really. But and I'm not really one for musicals, but I have seen this before. And as a Powell and Loy fanatic, I tried to see all the films they were paired in. And unfortunately, this one was not included in the Powell and Loy TCM box set that Warner Bros. Put together. So there are a couple that are floating around that are not in that box set, and obviously outside the classic Thin Man series. And this is one of them. Now, this one was a complete surprise to find. This is also a 1936 title, but it's not a film. It's actually a classic Republic serial, and one of their earlier ones. I actually just watched this last month, really, on Laserdisc, on the awesome Republic Laserdisc that I had gotten for this. And watching it and the Flash Gordon serials really helped me to get into classic serials again. And now I am actively trying to see more and more. Whereas before, I sort of knew of them, but I never really got hooked on them. I'd seen the Flash ones, but really watching these gave me the serial bug, and this one's really underrated. It's not perfect, and it's obviously Republic trying to do a serial like in the style of Flash Gordon, but obviously without the budget the Flash serials had and the great source material. But it was amazing to see this sticking out of the 99-cent bin. I was leaving a store and happened to turn around and look, and all of a sudden this was poking out of the top, and I'm like, no way, that can't be. That, of course, is the DVD, the actual official VCI disc for the classic serial Undersea Kingdom, which, again, is a very early Republic serial and very much modeled after the Flash Gordon serials Universal produced. This stars the titular hero Crash Corrigan, who is actually quite excellent, again, as a character very much in the Flash Gordon mold. Basically, it deals with a merry band of characters who wind up in the lost city of Atlantis. Again, very much taking some of the character tropes of the Flash Gordon serials, but instead of them getting on Sarkov's rocket ship and landing on the planet Mungo and dealing with the evil Ming the Merciless, they are in the underwater city of Atlantis that apparently exists in a sort of dome air bubble, so there's actual atmosphere in there. But it's a really well done serial. It's got great, interesting little bits. It's very charming. Some of the performers are not up to snuff in comparison to the others. It's got its own quirks, but I really enjoyed watching it on LD. And I looked up, and only this VCI release is official. It seems a little bit cleaner than the Laserdisc, but it seems like it's the same source. And this is it in terms of releases. You have the LD and you have this VCI DVD. Everything else is a bootleg or unofficial, and of course a lot of serials kind of fall into the public domain. So usually you'll find a bunch of cheapy DVDs of this, and it's that type of source. But I couldn't believe this was sticking out. You can identify it by it having the original serial poster, and of course it is a VCI disc. Now, they talk about having bonus features, but really you have some text stills about the film, the old style DVD text notes, and then you have a little promo for VCI serials. You get a chapter selection menu. That's an extra, chapter selections. But the biggest thing is it does include the trailer for the serial, which was also on the Laserdisc, and that's a really cool experience. Let me show you the disc itself. So this will identify to you if you're looking for this particular serial. Just make sure if you're wanting it on DVD to get the VCI version. I'm just really happy I found this because I had started looking for it ever since really enjoying the Laserdisc because I was very curious to see how this compared. And this is the only other official release. It's really unfortunate that most serials don't have good video releases, and for the most part, a lot of them were mastered for video during the Laserdisc era, and that means that's really about the best you can do. The DVDs will be a bit sharper, but you're also jumping from PCM audio to lossy Dolby Digital as well. So it's sort of a bit of a trade, but it's unfortunate that more serials aren't getting amazing new 4K scans like some of the ones that Kino Lorber has put out on Blu-ray. But I highly recommend this if you're a fan of serials and you haven't seen it. It's a hell of a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed every single chapter. And then lastly, from 1948, this is the last of the DVDs. This is an Olive Films title, so of course there is a Blu-ray, but it was a title I found at Dollar Tree, so I'm not going to let an Olive Films DVD pass me by for $1 simply because they didn't have the Blu-ray, and the cover is really gorgeous. So from 1948. This is the Paramount film Lulu Bell, starring Dorothy Lamour. Another film I've never seen, but again, I just couldn't let it sit there for $1, and it was the only one they had. And Olive Films releases have been popping up at some of the usual discount sites like HamiltonBooks.com, and they've had a lot of sales, and now they're turning up at Dollar Tree. So it seems like maybe they're trying to get rid of some inventory and such. So it might be wise to start picking up Olive titles before they are completely gone. And inside the disc with the Olive insert. Now on to standalone Blu-rays. This first one is another that was at Dollar Tree. It's another Olive Films disc. So again, it seems like they're clearing out a lot of old stock. This is something I never expected to pop up at a Dollar Tree, but this is actually, for 1947, this is a Frank Borzage picture. So that's my man. Unfortunately, most Olive discs, while it is great, they're getting these very rare to video in terms of film. A lot of films that had a lot of releases, if any at all, but they don't do really any special features or anything on these standard releases. But still, it's amazing to find Olive discs in the wild, and especially at a Dollar Tree. So I couldn't believe this was there. I'd heard reports about some people finding Olive discs, but I'm like, are you serious? Is this real? So yeah, I don't know what that means, and for the company, I hope that doesn't. It's not a sign of them potentially being on harder times or maybe closing their doors at some point. I don't know, but usually when you see titles and old stock pop up at discount outlets and such, it's usually not the best of signs. So I'm hoping that they're just like restructuring and just trying to clear out some old stock. Now, next up is a few Anthony Mann titles, and this first one I got because a number of Shout Select titles went on a really deep discount sale on Amazon and some other places. A lot of sites have been running some fantastic sales, like the Target Buy Two Get One Free, and Amazon did a lot of sales and coupons to sort of match that. And this is all long before the usual Barnes & Noble Criterion sale this month in July. So I've been meaning to get this one for a while, but Shout Select discs are usually very pricey and rarely go on sale. But I couldn't say no to this one. So this is the one of the iconic Anthony Mann and Jimmy Stewart partnered films. This is the really underrated biopic, The Glenn Miller Story, which, again, it's a 50s biopic, so you go into it thinking it can only be so good, and it's very deceptive. And I really attribute that entirely to it being directed by the great Anthony Mann. So this is another of his and Stewart's great films produced in their partnership, and it's Shout Select Spine number 56. But what's great about this is it takes it's actually got two different versions of the film and has the release version and the 1985, I think it is, Universal restoration of the film. So it's got a slightly different runtime on the two different versions, and it does have the original mono mix and then the stereo mix recreation, because of course it's about the classic musician Glenn Miller. So at the time, Universal did make a stereo mix of the film, and that's what was restored in the 1980s. So you get a bit of fun to dig around with the two different versions and the two different audio tracks, and it does have the theatrical trailer and a nice new commentary recorded for this release. The interior, and what's nice is they give you the 1985 restoration artwork as the alternate reverse sleeve art. Of course, transfer-wise, it's not the best thing in the world, and it's pretty much bringing over what came out beforehand on the German Blu-ray that I think uses the same master of this, but here we get it via shout with a commentary with both versions and a stereo and a mono mix. Here's another Olive title, again an Anthony Mann film from 1957. This is the really great war film Men in War, a nice black and white, very gritty war film. It's been a long time since I've seen it. Again, this film did not really have many, if any, video releases before this point. So I think when I saw it, it was on TCM or cable when I was growing up. So it's been an exceptionally long time, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this again. This is an olive disc that I've been meaning to pick up for ages, and luckily Hamilton Book came through and had a really awesome discount on this particular one. They've had a lot of olive Blu-rays coming through, but again, Hamilton Books almost always has fantastic deals, and they do their usual weekly or bi-weekly updates and new arrivals and price drops. So of course you want to act fast before things disappear, because I was lucky enough to get this one, but the next title I actually missed out on and had to resort to looking on eBay for. And that, of course, is the olive release of the 1958 Anthony Mann film God's Little Acre, with this really gorgeous art on the front. This is another very, very dark drama with a really fantastic cast, just like Men in War. This one I've never actually gotten to see, and as an Anthony Mann fanatic, this is just a great way to check off one more title that I haven't got to see yet. There's the interior with the olive insert. And again, luckily, I was able to find a relatively cheap copy on eBay since I missed out on getting a nice cheap copy at Hamilton Book. So again, it pays to go ahead and check out what's in your cart, because chances are things are going to start disappearing. And they are nice. They do send you reminders, but I just waited a little too long. But I'm very glad to be able to do this in a double feature with Men in War. This is another Hamilton Books pickup, another olive Blu-ray, another film that I've only seen part of. This is a really interesting film that Sidney Lumet made in 1972 with a really great cast. And that is, of course, the drama Child's Play, with this gorgeous original art that's very, very cheeky, but I really love it. Then the rear, unfortunately, because it's olive, there's no extras or anything. But again, this is a title that really didn't have a lot of decent video history. And unfortunately, just like with God's Little Acre, I missed out on the other olive Blu-ray Hamilton Books had, and that, of course, was the Lumet film Daniel, which sold out before I could get a copy, and now that's on eBay, unfortunately, for quite high prices. So I will have to go another avenue for that particular release. So again, if you want something on Hamilton Books, go ahead and get it, because otherwise it's probably going to be gone if you wait too long. Next up, this was a local find. This is the one title of the Fox Marilyn Monroe series Blu-rays that I was missing. I had gotten all of them individually for a really cheap price instead of getting them in the terrible packaged Forever Marilyn box set. And unfortunately, there was just one that I was missing, which of course is River of No Return, which was directed by Otto Preminger and co-starring the iconic legend himself, Robert Mitchum, who of course is one of my all-time favorite actors. So I needed this title for a number of different reasons, and so it was great to finally find a cheap copy to fill that gap. This does have the same sort of cover design as the other Marilyn films, There is the usual sort of Fox tomfoolery in terms of the color timing with these. I've never been the happiest with what they did color-wise on some of the Maryland Blu-rays. Some look better than others, and it'll be interesting to finally be able to look at this in person. It doesn't really have anything besides a trailer reel in terms of extras, so that's pretty much it. But what is nice is you are getting, which Fox usually does, you get a DTS HDMA 5.1 mix, but you also get a version of the film's original 4-track stereo presented in 4.0. So Fox is usually really good about that. And of course, this being a Fox title since the Disney buyout, chances of this coming out again anytime soon are really slim to none. So very happy to finally fill this collection gap. This was another local find. Couldn't believe it was sitting there. This is an olive Blu-ray that never goes on sale. I've wanted to get it for years. It's a film with a lot of crummy video releases before this, so this really rights a lot of old wrongs. This, of course, was directed by George Stevens, released in 1941, and it's the classic penny Serenade, with Cary Grant and Irene Dunne reprising their screen partnership, but obviously in a much different light. This is not a romantic comedy. This is a full-on drama that really helps to show Cary Grant's range, which he was practically never given credit for and still is not. So this is one of the films you can always point to when people want to play that game of saying Cary Grant was very much a one-note actor. The story is a little bit on the nose here and there, but it's still really well made for the time, and George Stevens could get great emotional moments out of performances out of practically anybody. So it's great what he was able to do with such an iconic pairing, an iconic screen team of classic screwball romantic comedies, because of course both Grant and Dunn had been paired famously many times, starting with the iconic film The Awful Truth in 1937. And so it's really interesting to see them in a film like this. So this is the way you want to see this, this Olive Blu-ray. Sadly, doesn't have any extras, as is typical for Olive, but at least it's getting the film out in a pretty nice HD transfer, and it's one I've just had on my wish list for years, and it never goes on sale. So very happy to finally chip away at this one. This next one was a total surprise. It was just sitting in one of the local stores for dirt cheap, especially for a Blu-ray, a silent film, a Kino release. So this was produced by Alan Dwan, released in 1923, and it's one of Gloria Swanson's great silent vehicles. It's the film Zaza, which I've never gotten to see, and again, not the thing you expect to pop up in your local store. It's got really nice extras. The score is actually adapted from the original cue sheet. So it's a brand new score accompaniment, but it is adapted from the original printed score for the film. It has a brand new audio commentary by Frederick Lombardi, the author of a book on Alan Dwan, and then it's got an essay in the booklet by Imogen Sarah Smith, who does great essays and commentaries. So it's a really nice stacked release from Kino for a silent. I've actually almost ordered this in one of the mini Kino sales, but of course, since Kino has released 10,000 Blu-rays by this point, it's so hard to chip away when you're doing the sales and you're trying to be the proper moderate purchaser and not just blow your life savings on every Kino Blu-ray you want. And then last is the other Shout Select title that I picked up that was on sale. I wanted to get this as soon as they announced it, but again, Shout Select titles usually are not... it's like any Shout disc, they're always a bit pricier, and I was hoping this would be a new transfer and have some of the deleted scenes that were seen in a television version, which you can see some glimpses of on YouTube, but unfortunately we didn't get any of that, and it's not a brand new master, but it is at least in HD, and it is an improvement over the DVD. I do have this film now on all three formats, but it's a film I really love. It's very underrated. And that, of course, is the 1976 film Murder by Death, based on the Neil Simon play. It's a must for mystery fans. If you loved, if you love locked room mysteries, or if you're an Agatha Christie fan, or you're a fan of any classic detective in literary fiction, or you love old Dark House films, any of those things. This basically takes all that stuff, combines it into a very knowing, witty riff on all of that. All the characters in the film are riffs on iconic, classic detective characters of literary and film eras, and they're all brought into a house where Truman Capote, of all people, has basically tried to set up the ultimate crime to stump all of them. And the joy of this is that each of the characters are played by fantastic stars, having real fun with the dialogue and playing around with these riffs on characters, from Sam Spade to Nick and Nora Charles to a version of Poirot and a hysterical version of Charlie Chan and the number one son. So it runs the gamut, and it's fun for fans of any of these characters. But again, the real joy of this film is seeing all the great stars in the film have a ball with the performances. And it really charms you, and it's a film you can return to many times. This is the perfect double feature with the masterpiece film Clue. If you ever wanted to know if there's another film remotely like the 1985 film Clue, this is the perfect film to double feature with it. Shout did create a new audio commentary with the historian Lee Gambin. There's a featurette with Neil Simon, the original trailer, and a photo gallery. But unfortunately, there's not a new transfer, and I really wish somebody would locate the deleted scenes from that TV version. Again, you can see some real tantalizing glimpses on YouTube, but and read about it a little bit, but that's about it. What I do enjoy, of course, is that they did bring back the classic original poster art that was drawn by the legendary Charles Addams, and it's a very whimsical. See if I get this to focus. It's a very whimsical poster. They did use this on the Laserdisc, which is a beautiful jacket that I've gone over in my Laserdisc videos. So this makes a nice companion piece to that, whereas the DVD just had a really generic picture of Peter Falk as the Sam Spade knockoff in the film, and just a bunch of question marks on it. It's a strange DVD jacket. So I'm happy we did get the original art back, and I'm happy I finally have this at a nice price. But I still hope someday this could get like a brand new 4K scan, and the deleted scenes could be located. But still, it's a nice Blu-ray. It's nice to have this film in HD. And if you've never seen it, it's really a joy. So for the last part of this video, we move on to box sets. And we'll start with the lone Blu-ray box set that I picked up. And I mean, it's not really a box set, but it is a multi-disc series set, and it's in a slipcase, so I'm just going to call it a box set. This is the new slimmed-down US Blu-ray packaging for the recent full-on restorations undertaken by Network in the UK of the iconic landmark Monty Python's Flying Circus. So this is the complete series from the restorations with all the extras and things, but without the extremely elaborate, lovely box set that was released in Europe with the extensive book for each season. I really wanted to get a copy of that, but it was quite expensive, and the problem with those was that the packaging, while it was lovingly designed, was getting destroyed in shipping. So everybody was getting boxes in where the actual beautiful box was just ripped apart, and the discs were going everywhere, and it was a real chore and challenge for people to get boxes that weren't destroyed. And then over here you had to import them, which only added to the cost and the risks of shipping. I knew they were doing individual releases, and I thought about importing those, but it was still a little bit pricey. And then lo and behold, this popped up on sale at an extreme discount just recently, and so I just went ahead and bit the bullet because I didn't see this being this cheap again at just under $50 instead of paying the $200 or more for the original set. All the contents of the discs are here. It's the same disc, but of course in a slimmed down Blu-ray case like this. You do get a booklet, but it's not the full-on gigantic books that accompany the original release, which I still would love to just have those books. But at least you do get a little booklet, And what's great about this is they do a full detailing about the project. It's a note from Network, and then it's this entire booklet basically is going through the restoration process, which was very difficult because, of course, the series was it's a vintage television series, so it's a mixture of videotape and 16 millimeter film footage. But of course, most of it is videotape on old broadcast standards. So that meant that there had to be two releases prepared. In Britain and Europe, everybody is getting the 50i version. So at the original 50 interlace frame rates, whereas most U.S. televisions aren't going to be able to properly represent that because most manufacturers don't think about adding that for the U.S. market. So they had to do a conversion process, and when you order a copy here, it's at 60i, so 60 interlace frames instead of 50. And the conversion process is done very well. I would have preferred to have the original 50i version, but again, this was so cheap, and I've really wanted to see this restoration because it's been a while since I've sat down and watched the whole Flying Circus. Again, I didn't see this becoming this cheap again, so I figured I might as well go ahead because, again, this is literally the cheapest I've ever seen this. Unfortunately, because it's one of these multi-disc hubs, and it's very common for the spines of these to break, I've had a lot of DVD sets have that. When I got this, there's already some cracking in the plastic, but fortunately the discs were all okay. But there were some in between that had come off the hubs because the hubs themselves are very tiny. So you will have to watch out for that and make sure you don't get a copy with a bunch of floaters in it. And then, of course, the actual episode breakdown is printed inside the actual, the reverse of the actual art. So this is pretty much the best that Flying Circus is probably ever really going to look, and it was a very intensive restoration process. I'm very glad we have a slimmed down version for the US market now, and apparently they have this same box available in Europe as well as of this recording. I do wish I would prefer, obviously, to have the original European frame rate and the European fancier box and the lovely art and those really intensive long books that accompanied the original box set. But for the time being, this hit that sweet spot of being at a very affordable price. And again, you're getting all the on-disc extras. The discs themselves are the same, so you're not missing anything in terms of that. You're just, this is the no swag version. This one also isn't necessarily a box set, but it is a TV series complete release that I've wanted to see for a long time, just never gotten around to it. And again, it was absurdly cheap. And that, of course, is the early 1990s complete series of The Flash, which I've wanted to see for a while. I'm not really a Flash fan. I do enjoy DC characters though, and I've wanted to see this for a long while because I really enjoy the whole 90s era of comic book adaptations being a sort of all over the place no man's land of various adaptations. And this series has a pretty good reputation that's only grown by leaps and bounds over time. So I just never got around to seeing it, and this is the repackaged version in a multi-disc hub case. Originally, it had a slip box and stuff, which again, I would prefer to have that, but finding this guy for, just a few bucks, I was just like, yes, I've wanted to see this forever. I will go for it. And the discs were in perfect shape, and the hubs are perfectly fine. Really nice art on here, really nice packaging, and of course you can tell this was when DVD was still king and they were putting a nice effort into their packaging. And then you get a really nice fold-out booklet that details the episode breakdown per disc. I like the fact that they use this vintage flash art as the actual entire reverse art. So there you have it, the complete series of The Flash, and just another sign of the amazing deals that are to be had in the DVD market right now. And speaking of that, I have another complete series DVD set that was absurdly cheap because this was actually free because I traded in a lot of old books and other odds and ends to one of our local bookstores and got a bunch of trade credit and used that for a number of these and was just sort of roaming around for a few minutes and then happened to see this sticking out on the top shelf of some other box sets, and I saw the price sticker on it and thought that had to be a mistake, and it was not. So I checked the discs thoroughly, and they were all fine. So yeah, I couldn't believe I finally got this, and it didn't cost me anything. This is the trying to think of the right word, I guess the economy repackaged, slimmed down, single box version, which is something CBS Paramount has been doing with a lot of their classic shows on DVD. Originally, this series had many different multi-season volume box sets, but it's all been condensed into this one large, ginormous complete series box. So here we have the complete series of the iconic 50s classic Western Have Gun Will Travel. I've been trying to get more into 50s TV Westerns for the longest time, and this is the series I've wanted to see most of all because of its reputation as being one of the top Western series of all time, having a more serious bent to it, being about great storytelling, and of course featuring some great guest stars. And so finding it in this way is just really nice, and of course is a easy way to save on shelf space. Once you slip this off, though, you see it is one of these ginormous multi-disc tiered hinge cases. I don't exactly know what you call them. I think maybe it's an Epic Pack, but I always forget the specific name. Now, these can be very tricky to use, but this one in particular is one of the oddest I've seen because there are literally so many discs crammed in here. So when you open it, already you've got tons of discs here in the first part. Then you have this hinge where there's more discs, and you have to be very careful. So it basically folds into a shape like this. And they did do a really nice bit where there is actual custom art on the jacket rear. And there in between the discs, you have the lead character himself beautifully posed. So that's a nice touch. But yeah, I couldn't believe it that this was complete, and I literally pulled out all 30 some odd discs in here and checked all of them, and they are all scratch free. Which again, buying one of these used, you want to be sure and check that because most people are not going to be very cautious pulling these discs out of these massive sets. And it is a bit finicky. It is hard to just pull out a random disc to look at a specific episode. You do have to remove a bunch of discs and things. But for the savings and the shelf space savings, it's not the worst thing in the world. And as long as you're very careful, this one's actually designed pretty well. And it is a ton of material in here. So I was very pleasantly surprised at, how well this was put together in terms of design. So this is the entire 35 disc set of Have Gun Will Travel, which ran from 1957 to 1963. So I will get to have almost 96 hours of fun finally getting to see this series start to finish, and I'm very excited to do so as a Western geek, and just couldn't believe I could get this at such an absurdly cheap price. It is a real mammoth DVD set. Next, we move on to a box set I have tried to get for ages, simply because I have all the other Fox ones, and this one is the most elusive and usually goes for a nice amount on eBay. Sometimes it can get as high as $100 or more. And this is a set that's been out of print for a number of years, and it is very unlikely these films are going to get a reissue anytime soon, which is unfortunate because it is actually a very good film series that often gets overlooked. But again, this particular final volume Fox did is the hardest to find. That, of course, is the 5th volume of Fox's restored Charlie Chan films. So this is the final volume, which brings together all the surviving Fox films throughout 5 volumes. The first 3 feature the Warner Oland starring films, and then volumes 4 and 5 feature the Sidney Toler starring films that Fox owns. And of course, after this point, Toler would move over to other studios and continue the series, eventually winding up at Monogram. So the other Chan films are spread out over many different DVD sets. Most of them are Warner Brothers, and then MGM has one. But the main boxes of these restored titles are from Fox. This is the 5th and final volume, which came out a number of years after they started, and was seemingly printed in limited quantities, which is why it started disappearing so quick. I couldn't believe this was available for me to use some of my trade credit on. So I was just immediately excited because I've been wanting to watch all the Chan films in order, which I've never done. I've only seen bits and pieces of them over the years. And slowly I've found some of the other volumes and eventually had all four and needed box 5 and could never find this thing. It's also nice. It's kind of got some nice embossing on the cover, so it's got a nice glossy sheen to it. It's a little bit fancier, so at least it makes it feel a little bit more premium. The quality of the films, from what I gather, it's sort of debatable. Some people have their favorites, but over time, once they get over to monogram, the quality, of course, takes a hit. But the Fox films are generally regarded as the best of all the Chan films. And there are quite a lot of Chan films because at most counts are somewhere around 50 Chan films, of which a great number are unfortunately lost. And Fox did do a really intensive restoration process on these because most of these films were in really terrible shape, particularly the earliest of the surviving Warner Olin films. And when you look at them on DVD, you can see that because even with their restoration process at the time, they are really rough, and it's unfortunate that these films probably aren't going to get reissued because these are nice DVDs. But it would be amazing to see an HD presentation of some of these and modern restoration techniques applied, particularly to the early films that really need it. So, of course, the first 3 discs are double features, so you're getting more than 4 films. The first couple volumes were 4 films on individual single-layer DVDs. What's also great is they do include all the original trailers where they can, the ones that survived, and the actual extras in each volume were produced by John Cork, who was in charge of the great James Bond DVD documentaries and extra features. So each volume usually has 1 or 2 really nice featurettes with various film and cultural historians that are really informative, and I've really been enjoying watching them as I go through the series. This one, the featurette, is included on the final film disc, which of course was just a single film, so they had more space to put the featurette on. And what's great is they kept the nice matching art style of the previous 4 volumes. And the box itself matches, each one is a different color, but they all match side by side, and so you can put them on the shelf. So now I can finally fill the Volume 5 shape hole on my Charlie Chan shelf. And then last to round out this video, and certainly not least, this is the most surprising thing that I found in the local stores. It's another DVD box set, but this is one I've wanted to get for ages, ever since it came out back in 2008. It's still very expensive. It's a hard set to come by. I have never seen this in person, and it features a number of really great restorations of these films that I've been really wanting to see. So this is the Flicker Alley box set in partnership with Blackhawk Films and Lobster Films of the just wonderful box. The Douglas Fairbanks A Modern Musketeer box set, again from Flicker Alley. These are full-on restorations spread across 5 DVDs of 11 classic Fairbanks films, including a brand new restoration and new score for the iconic landmark film The Mark of Zorro. I've wanted to get this for ages, and again, this was part of that collection that came through, and it was just absurdly cheap, plus the store ran a sale as well, so I was just like, just take my money, please, just take my money. And I figured as soon as I bought this, they would finally announce a Blu-ray box set to take the place of DVD, because these have never been released to Blu-ray. There are no HD versions of these, so that's another reason why this is still desirable. But it's a really nice package. I love the artwork they came up with, nicely put together, and then you slip everything out, and the actual booklet is not a booklet. It's a full-on bound piece with the Flicker Alley logo, and then the actual essay itself is co-written by Jeffrey Vance, who wrote the great book on Fairbanks, which I have read and really enjoyed. And nice stills, a nice glossy cardstock on here. So this is a really nicely put together booklet. So it basically gives you a miniature biography on Fairbanks and specifically mentions the films contained within this set. So then the actual films are on individual DVDs in these nice slim cases that all feature some form of original poster art. So disc 1 has 3 features on it: His Picture in the Papers, Mystery of the Leaping Fish, and Flirting with Fate. And then the back has each film with its chapter index. And then the artwork continues into the interior. And here you get what seems like an original lobby card. Disc 2 contains 2 films, The Metromaniac and Wild and Woolly. Again, chapter index is on the back. And nice vintage original art on the interior and the disc itself. Disc 3 has 2 features, Reaching for the Moon and A Modern Musketeer. There's the rear. Again, nice matching interior art and disc label. Disc 4 has 2 features, When the Clouds Roll By and The Mollycoddle. And then disc 5 has the final 2 features, which of course are The Nut and The Mark of Zorro. So that's the contents of this set. The actual extras package on the discs themselves include photo galleries with tons of rare stills and poster images and lobby cards. And then on The Modern Musketeer, you get an audio commentary from the writers of the booklet and the Fairbanks biographers. This is a really wonderfully produced set. It's unfortunate that not only has this not come to Blu-ray, but when you watch these, you always want to look at the other Fairbanks films, and so you wish they had included Fairbanks's Robin Hood, for example, and some of, or obviously done a version of Thief of Baghdad. But at least that has, the great Blu-ray from Masters of Cinema, for example. But I really hope we can get an HD upgrade of this at some point, and also the other Fairbanks films, because they're so undeniably important, and it's amazing to see them cleaned up like this. I haven't seen all of these before, so some of these will be first-time watches for me, and I have wanted to get this set for ages, but it's usually extremely expensive, hovering around the $100 mark or more most of the time. So it was amazing to see, and again, it was part of this giant collection that's been coming in batches. So my thanks to the original collector who just amassed such a wonderful collection with great taste, and so I'm so excited to finally look at these. And of course, I figured as soon as I buy this, they'll announce a Blu-ray from Lobster and Flicker Alley. So that does it for this rather long video. It was just a lot of discs that turned up, and most of these I simply couldn't believe appeared in local stores. Some things were from online sales that I picked up, but again, the Fairbanks set and the Charlie Chan Volume 5, it being at the local store, along with all these Warner Archive DVDs, it's just been a real treasure hunt, which I'm not used to. I'm used to looking for laser discs and finding the occasional gem of a DVD, but usually it's stuff that you're most always going to find in a store. It's never the specialty stuff. Especially, you don't find silent films and silent film restorations and Flicker Alley titles and stuff like that. It's just amazing what can turn up. So I wanted to put this together into a video to show everyone, and hopefully, inspire you to check some of these things out if you haven't thought to add them to your own collection yet, or dust things off the shelf that you haven't watched in a while, or have things to add to your own wish list. Which, of course, if it's anything like mine, I usually add many titles to my wish list on a daily basis, or anytime I think of something, I always come across new stuff. So hopefully you guys can share in my joy of these gems that I have found in some of the local shops and some various sales and such. As always, I hope this has been informative, and hopefully you've been able to enjoy me babbling under a pile of a literal pile of DVDs and Blu-rays. But it just goes to show you never know what's going to turn up at your local shop. So always support your local independent record stores, bookstores, and if you're lucky enough to have a specific movie store for used DVDs, Blu-rays, Laserdiscs, and even the occasional VHS tape. So with that, again, thank you so much for watching, and keep your disc spinning and keep physical media alive.